The SCP Foundation's goal is to contain anomalies and protect us from them. Many of these creatures are dangerous monsters which appear physically threatening. However, some anomalies take the form of ordinary creatures, such as animals. In this video, we explore the most interesting animal-related SCPs. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel with notifications on, so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we will be exploring more interesting topics like this one very soon. Number 5. SCP-1316. Object Class Euclid. SCP-1316 is a female house cat that exhibits no unusual behavior besides an increased friendliness to strangers. Despite having been in Foundation custody since 1948, it is physiologically identical to a 3-month-old kitten and shows no signs of aging. And given her ordinary cat-like behavior, SCP-1316, also called Lucy, was allowed to freely roam around Site-112. However, it was soon discovered that this normal-looking cat had another, far more dangerous anomalous ability. On the 16th of August, 1952, Site-112 was attacked by several Chaos Insurgency strike teams. A massive security breach ensued, during which numerous SCPs were stolen, some were destroyed, and dozens of Foundation personnel were terminated. After the attack, following standard counterintelligence practice, all Foundation personnel were debriefed and a scan of the site for bugs ensued. In addition to a few electronic listening devices, SCP-1316 was found to be a source of regular broadcasts. The cat emitted a radio broadcast every day at 9:20 GMT for exactly 5 minutes, which could be picked up by any standard shortwave radio. Following this discovery, SCP-1316 was isolated and only D-Class personnel are allowed to come into contact with the cat to reduce the likelihood of intelligence breaches. Naturally, these messages were encrypted, but the Foundation deciphered a few of the messages following the attack. Examples include Operation Successful, Mission Complete, Request Further Orders or Extraction, F Suspicious, Movement Restricted, Requesting Extraction, Orders Not Forthcoming, Requesting Notification, Confined to Single Room, Was Promised Extraction upon completion of mission, Moved to New Site, Unclear on Status of Mission, Requesting Further Orders, Was Referred to W SCP Designation, F Knows, Request Immediate Extraction, Unclear if Last Message Received, Extraction Requested, Please. There is no extraction, is there? Following the last message, SCP-1316 has ceased regular broadcasts. However, it continues to behave like an ordinary house cat. So, as we see, SCP-1316 appears to have been made by the Chaos Insurgency with the goal of spying on the Foundation. So now we know that in the SCP universe, using regular human spies is outdated, and a cat can be just as effective. Number 4. SCP-247. Object Class Euclid. SCP-247 appears to be a female house cat. Its only abnormal physical trait is the fact that 247 has an orange and black striped coat resembling that of a tiger. The animal appears just as affectionate as any ordinary house cat, and as a result, SCP-247 will begin to purr and mew when approached by a human. This person will remark this as adorable and approach to pet the subject. However, spending a few minutes with the cat will reveal its anomalous abilities. This is because the harmless cat appearance is just an illusion, and in reality, SCP-247 is actually a hostile Bengal tiger. Its true nature has been confirmed by analysis of weight, water displacement, and dental molds made from bite marks. The cat will lure its victims with its cute appearance, and several minutes later, 247 will reveal its true nature, attack the subjects, and devour them. However, SCP-247 possesses another anomalous trait. This is because a psychic component radiates outwards from the subject, and any sentient being within this field comes under the impression that SCP-247 is completely harmless, even if the subject knows about the animal's real nature. Also, this effect causes anyone that observes the cat to approach it, even if that person strongly dislikes cats. Individuals in this field also show extreme reluctance to harm and don't allow others to attack SCP-247, even if they are being attacked by the animal. As a result, anyone that falls under the cat's effect is totally defenseless. Remote feeds and photos also show this illusion, although it's unknown whether the photo itself is affected or merely the observer. However, 247 will have an effect on any sapient being that sees it, so its effect isn't only limited to humans. Because of this, SCP-247 has been tested with numerous animals. On one occasion, it was tested with a deer, but after the cat was allowed to feed on another subject, and SCP-247 completely ignored the deer for over a day before apparently becoming hungry and attacking it. This was also the case during a chimpanzee test, revealing that 247 seems to prefer humans, both as food and for entertainment. For example, other prey animals presented to SCP-247 were all terminated with a single strike, while humans are allowed to pet the SCP for some time before being played around with in the same way a cat will play with a mouse. And finally, genetic analysis of SCP-247 shows slight deviation from a typical Bengal tiger's genotype, meaning that this animal has reproduced with other animals prior to its containment, and that there may be more such animals out there. Let's just hope that there aren't many animals similar to SCP-247 in the wilderness, and that these innocent-looking cats don't coordinate an attack on a city. Number 3. SCP-2146 Object Class Euclid. SCP-2146 is the body of a frozen adult whale, which is miraculously located in medium Earth orbit. The object is approximately 60 feet in length and weighs 30 tons, 1/3 of that of a healthy specimen of its species, due to its dehydration. In addition, SCP-2146 has suffered significant corrosion from impacts with space debris and is deeply cracked due to exposure to the sun's radiation. However, the fact that it's located in space isn't even SCP-2146's most bizarre property. This is because once a month, this whale begins broadcasting radio signals, designated SCP-2146-1. These broadcasts vary widely in both content and format. Some appear to be documentaries, others appear to be science fiction dramas, often space-related. Some seem to be children's shows, and others are songs or poems. They only feature an audio track, and in every case, feature an entity designated SCP-2146-2, which narrates, acts, or sings the content of these broadcasts. However, these transmissions are far from normal because they often feature unusual and occasionally disturbing content. But despite of this, the narrator is always cheerful. These broadcasts contain one unifying feature. In every case, the contents deal with a space whale, but the features of this creature change with each broadcast. No information as to how SCP-2146 came to be located in orbit has come to light, and no launches capable of transporting an animal as large as a whale are known to the Foundation. As we already said, SCP-2146's broadcasts are very bizarre, and you're about to see why. On one occasion, the whale told the story of a few scientists in space, which attempted to locate a legendary creature, the space whale. The scientists are shown to be very incompetent, and the story ends with the crew finding the space whale and in awe, pledging to worship it. Another broadcast details a short political manifesto laying out the rights of exocetaceans and makes a number of derogatory claims regarding oppressive higher-dimensional harpoonists. And lastly, on one occasion, SCP-2146 transmitted a documentary which detailed the feeding and mating process of the space whale, a process that requires the utter destruction of a primitive civilization. So as we see, SCP-2146 2146 is not only a space whale, but it also appears to be a hostile space whale. Let's just hope that apart from these transmissions, 2146 won't gain any other anomalous abilities which would allow it to enforce its political ideologies. Number 2. SCP-529 Object Class Safe. SCP-529 is a small house cat with gray tabby markings, nicknamed Josie. SCP-529's anomalous properties consist in the fact that parts of the animal to the rear of the end of the ribcage appear to be missing. More specifically, the body terminates sharply as if sliced in two. But in spite of this, SCP-529 has no health problems and moves about as if its hindquarters were still in place. For example, walking takes place as usual, and 529's body simply hovers as if its back legs were invisible. Also, sometime after feeding, the animal makes motions as if to void itself of waste matter. Observation of SCP-529's cross-section does not reveal the interior of the animal, but instead appears pure black to the eye, and this section absorbs all wavelengths of light, similar to a black hole's effect. SCP-529's end section is slightly yielding to the touch, and gentle stroking of this area sometimes yields a positive reaction, such as purring, but more usually leads to the creature turning on the agent, claws at the ready. However, these scratches also appear non-anomalous. Experiments aiming to show that SCP-529's back half does exist, but is nearly invisible have failed, and a cursory examination will show that there are no hindquarters. DNA testing doesn't show anything interesting either, apart from the fact that SCP-529 is a female. And of course, because 529 is an ordinary cat, apart from her back half, of course, no special containment procedures are necessary, so Josie is free to move about the lower levels of its containment facility. And of course, this improves morale because SCP-529 is just as affectionate as any ordinary house cat. So as we see, the animals of the SCP Foundation definitely don't disappoint, especially SCP-529, which combines the cuteness of a normal cat and the creepiness we normally associate with the SCP Wiki. Number 1. SCP-1192 Object Class Euclid. SCP-1192 appears to be a juvenile male cockatoo approximately 1 foot in height. However, 1192's appearance is deceiving because the animal is actually sapient and exhibits intelligence and common knowledge consistent with that of a human child between the ages of 6 and 8. Furthermore, SCP-1192 doesn't behave as an ordinary bird of its species would because it's unable to preen itself and has difficulty flying despite being healthy. The bird was discovered and brought into containment by an agent, who at the time was embedded as an undercover agent. SCP-1192 began following the agent, trying to attract his attention because of his police uniform. The agent became suspicious due to SCP-1192's unusual species and erratic behavior, and a containment team was dispatched. After it was contained, 1192 was tested. However, the animal immediately gravitated to a pencil and paper and began to attempt to write crude sentences. The first thing 1192 wrote was, "Who are you?" And when the parrot was told it was in a hospital, it revealed that it's called Timmy. When asked if it knows what happened, SCP-1192 said that it has no idea and wrote, "I wanna go home." The bird even wrote down its former address, which led to a residential home in Montana. Of course, undercover agents were sent to the residence, and they determined that the house is inhabited by a man, a woman, and their son Timothy, age 7. However, apart from the fact that the child's name and age coincided with that of SCP-1192, nothing out of the ordinary was observed. As a result, 1192 remains in containment, and the bird is allowed a wide range of toys, but Timmy shows little interest in such activities. Instead, the bird writes and makes drawings. For example, Timmy often practices his writing, draws race cars, and writes sentences such as, "Why am I a bird?" Also, on one occasion, SCP-1192 drew a small child holding the hands of two adults, but the child was scratched out and the paper was ripped. The sentence, "I want my mom," was written on the backside. So, as we see, SCP-1192's origin remains totally unknown. One thing is certain, however, Timmy's life story is definitely heartbreaking. So which animal SCP was your favorite? Let us know in the comments. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, as we have many more interesting SCP videos coming up.